going to have a sort of a dialogue between myself and Professors Wilson and Smith. And at the end, we'll have time for about a few questions. So when I was undergraduate, as many of you are undergraduates, I was interested in economics. I found the point of view of economics to be very interesting. But I didn't necessarily find economic research to be all that compelling until I was introduced to the idea of an economics experiment. And I thought that was pretty neat, and that's when I got introduced to Professor Smith's work. And so it's a real treat for me to have him here to talk to you today. I should also mention that I'm a big fan of Professor Wilson's work. He's one of my favorite people to see at conferences. Whenever I see he's presenting, I always make it a point to go see that because he does some really, really neat stuff. Let's start with the idea of an economics experiment.
Today, universities that have fairly active experimental programs have laboratories to the terminals, and you interact with other people in the experiment through terminals to become electronic. That wasn't the beginning. My first experiment was done in 1976, 20 years later, before we were starting just doing the first software development on computers to do the kind of so people could do the kind of experiment that I did by hand back in 1956. Experiments for me, it was in no way was this part of some grand plan. In the fall of 1955, I was a young assistant professor at Purdue University, West Lafayette, Indiana. And I taught principle. And at the elementary level, it was primarily about market pricing and supply and demand and how resources get allocated. But in the process of teaching, I realized that there's something I didn't know anything about. And that's the connection between these graphs that we drew on the board and what people do out there on the ground. I knew nothing about that. Moreover, my colleagues in economics didn't know anything about it. This bothered me because I had difficulty answering the questions of students from their perspective. See, they didn't know this stuff yet. And of course, I may have had those questions at one time, but now I have long since that had bothered me. But now I had to come to terms with that. So I resolved in the next semester that began in January, I would, the first day in the class, I would the supply and demand experiment. I had an idea how to create demand and create supply in a market. There were 22 people in that class, I just remember. So, like it was yesterday. And I thought, well, I'll make half of them buyers, half of them sellers. Okay. And I gave the buyers each a little yellow card. And the yellow card identified them by number on the top, and underneath was a price. And they were to understand that was the value of the commodity that we were going to trade to them. And it represented the most they would be willing to pay for 1 unit. That was the idea. And if you took those numbers, and so there were 11 numbers, they could have been random, but they were orderly. So this a stair step. You take those numbers and array them from highest to lowest. You see, that's what economists meant by demand scale. And then similarly, I passed out white cards to people who were sellers, and they had a price which was there with the minimum amount they would accept. For less than that, you'd rather keep. Okay, so just an abstract commodity, it might be anything. But then how do people trade? Well, I thought, the markets that surely are the most competitive, stock exchanges and the commodity exchanges. And I didn't know much about these, but I got an old finance book over in the library, and it described how trading took place on the stock exchange and also in the commodity pits where wheat, soybeans, and pork bellies and various things were traded in Chicago. It became known as a double auction. Buyers announced bids, sellers announce ask, and it's an orderly way. Buyers tend to start out and bid low because they're trying to price buy it low, and sellers tend to ask high, and then the new ask had to be lower, the new bid had to be higher, so it was a two-sided auction, very much like a country auction, except there's multiple sellers and multiple buyers rather than just one farm tractor. So that's the way I started. And now, what did I expect to happen? Well, what we taught was the supply and demand theory was a very abstract idea. And unless people had complete information and a market knew supply and demand and knew the price that would clear the market, it was unlikely to actually be achieved in a real market. That's the sort of thing that we taught. Also, there were stories about you had to have a really large number of buyers and sellers for this to work. And also people had to be small enough relative to the total that they were price takers. So that was the kind of stuff we were trying to teach. So, well, okay, here's a way in which people actually trade. Let's do it where at least I know what the supply and demand is, but no one in the market knows. So I thought, this will show that markets won't work because then they don't have complete information. Okay, so I was going to give it a good best shot, you see, with this notion of the markets, the trading rules that come from real markets. The first experiment I did, we started out and people did ask and trade and then go to completion. We had a fixed time. I did. And then we'd start anew, so we'd repeat it. So it's like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, market. Well, it converged to the equilibrium. And about, 3 or 4 iterations, it's really close. I thought there must be something wrong with the experiment. They're not supposed to work that well. And then I realized probably what was wrong. It was completely symmetric. Supply and demand, so that the average value of the buyer, the average cost of the seller, the equilibrium price were all the same. I thought that must be a flawed experiment. So then I did one with pretty flat demand and supply. It converged too. And so I kept doing it. They all converged. These people, they didn't know anything about economics. Hadn't studied any of this stuff. Most had never seen anything like a two-sided auction, although people at Purdue, that were people from the farm community, they had seen auctions. So that was the situation. So people just get into this, and they don't have any trouble finding the equilibrium by trial and error and adjustment over time. And it didn't really make any difference what the supply and demand was. They find it. The first few I didn't have any real motivation, any cash motivation. But I soon realized that people need real motivations. People that earn real money in these experiments. So buyers got paid the difference between their value and the price at which they bought. So if your value is $6 and you buy it for $2, you just made $4. Okay, and so pretty soon we went from that to other kinds of trading, like retail markets. You go in, there's a price, take it or leave it. Sorry, I need to warm you up to give you an idea what that was the idea of the first experiment. And to me, it was just a way of answering questions that I had. And I went on and found that usually this must be a law of nature. People can find these people and it's an aspect, as I've learned much later in reading Adam Smith's theory of moral sentiments, it's just an aspect of our sociability. Nothing really new here. It's been going on for many centuries.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about use of experiments for both looking at theory and for looking at institutional design, or if you prefer theory versus policy.
These experiments were motivated by theory and the way we have of creating an abstract model. Of course, assume that people have motivation. And notice in this market, buyers profit whenever they buy for less than most are willing to pay. And we don't normally think of buyers profit trade without a seller, but that's wrong. Everybody profits from trade, that's why they trade. And they trade because they see themselves as better off without the money and having the commodity. The sellers see themselves as better off with the money without having the commodity. Gradually we began to realize where do these rules come from? Well, there are institutions that form. So people discovered these ways of trading. One of the directions in which experimental economics went was in the direction of better understanding institutions. Institutions are sets of rules which define how it is people live economically. And so more and more of laboratory experiments started to explore that space. One of the early questions that came up was, well, people don't need complete information, they don't need all that. Suppose they did have it. How would that work? So we go to the other side. Well, it turns out that slowed down the markets. Very commonly, people could with complete information, they could identify better things to do. Ultimately, we got into a lot of policy work. For example, after we went computerized, one of the questions people were starting to talk about in the 80s was whether more use for markets could be made in electric power, natural gas pipeline. Those were all regulated. They were created monopolies. Electric power was a created monopoly, whatever the city was, and its prices were regulated. It was thought that was the only way in which we organized. America is fairly unique in having electric power organized as a regulated monopoly. Most countries in the world, it's not regulated, it's owned by the government. Starting in the 80s, there was a movement to move these out of the government. One of the reasons why was that they were losing money. Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady of the Kingdom, wanted to denationalize the electric power industry to help the British traders. That movement started to come, and that got us interested in designing experiments in the laboratory. We went to New Zealand and Australia and were part of programs there using laboratory experiments as a demonstration. The neat thing about that with computers, in Australia you can create the actual grid that's out there. In the economy, you know all the generators that are owned by someone. You can take generators with those characteristics given to a subject, an experiment, and let him manage that. Okay, and fit into a market. So we started to try to, wow, all of our evidence was that those really worked well. National Grid Management Council in Australia started to build plans around kind of basically adapting that. Starting up in 1994 or 5, they actually started creating power out there in the world. So here's a case where what started in the lab became a field experiment. It worked, and they've never looked back.
One of the attractive features of designing the experiment is that you can control the environment that you give to your participants. And when you take your first economics class, there's a Latin phrase that you get introduced to very quickly: ceteris paribus, all other things equal. And experimental economists take that even further in one sense. And one IO economist once described experimental economists to me as control freaks. The idea being that when you want to test one of these institutions for designing electric power, you can hold constant the values and the costs that every set of participants see. In the rapidly occurring world, the world's always changing, it's dynamic. We don't know if over time if that might be very important. So in the laboratory, we can bring in the same set of circumstances and then change the rules. So one of the projects that I worked on with Vernon and Steve Resenti after I left the Federal Trade Commission was how to deregulate the electric power grid in California. So this was May of 2000 that we started running our first experiments. And we had set up the institution to model exactly what California had done. That is, the generators were going to submit their bids, and wherever that cleared with the load, that would be the price. And this seemed to, Vernon and Steve have been working on this for a while, to be potentially problematic. In May of 2000. June of 2000, they got struck by a set of droughts and certain power generators going offline, and all of a sudden prices were spiking. There were brownouts, blackouts, rolling blackouts, and people in San Diego marching in the streets, burning their power bills because the prices were skyrocketing. Well, the thing was, we had designed an experiment that might get at why that might be the case. Because buyers couldn't express when they didn't want to buy power anymore, price matching on. Whatever the load was, whatever all the power generators wanted to produce, whatever people wanted, they provide that amount. We couldn't say if the price got too high, shut me off. So we designed an experiment where we allowed consumers in the experiment to say, no, the price is too high, shut me off. All it took was 10% of the total demand to say, no, that's too high, I'll dry my clothes at night, not when the hottest part of the day. In our experiment, that disciplined the sellers and all the spikes went away completely. And the power of that was that you could keep the values and the cost constant, have the same load shocks, exactly the same load shocks, put that same stress on there, and see what happens when the buyers could just say no.
As a way of learning things about the world, it gives you a really nice framework. You can actually design an institution and test it in the laboratory and look at that. I guess we could focus in two areas. So Adam Smith wrote two major works, one dealing primarily with the market. How did Adam Smith do in terms of what we learned from experiments?
Well, one day when Vernon and I were teaching an honors class at George Mason, Vernon came by my office. We don't have an experiment to get at the basic premise, basic proposition that Adam Smith has for the developed nations, that the division of labor is limited by the extent of the market. And so we set out to design an experiment, add to our class, and demonstrate that principle to see how well it actually works. We designed an experiment that was wide open, and we wanted to see if people discovered that they could trade, would they then specialize? And if we had larger amounts of groups, bigger groups, would that become even more competitive? We had in the back of our mind that maybe these participants would create their own double auction. One of the most fascinating things about that experiment was that when people discovered that they could trade, and we didn't tell them that, they produced things that we called field, and then there was this place called their house. And we told them purposely in the passive voice, items that have been moved to your house will generate some earnings for you. We said, okay. You could do it all by yourself, live in autarky, do the best you can. But you had to discover, without any word instruction from us, that you could also put things in other people's houses. And they could put them in yours. And they were free, open, and chat. So there was talking through the computer, so we were recording everything they were saying and what happened. And you would hear these conversations about, I wonder, can I give those things to you? No, I don't think so. Let's try it. Oh, you can give them things to each other. And the first thing comes out is, which one do you produce faster? As soon as they discovered that they could trade, they were looking for, well, how can we make the best of the situation? You produce more of what you're good at, I'll produce what I'm good at, and we'll trade. And of course, like every experiment, there's always something you did to participate. And this is the best part about being an experimental economist, that you get to put your own ideas to the test, how you think about the world, and then see the participant tell you, oh no, this is how the world works. We thought that we have groups of 2, groups of 4, and then groups of 8. That the 8-person groups, these are the ones where there's going to be lots of trade, lots of specialization, be the wealthiest one of all. we were wrong. With pairs, some pairs very quickly figured out that they could trade and were working 3 times as much as they could by themselves, so non-autarky. But some pairs, it never dawned on them ever to try that. They just sat there, thought this was it, do this by yourself, and watch it. We moved to groups of 4. Every group of 4, the median period, every group of 4, and the median period was period 1, where somebody just tried to give something to somebody else. So you get the group a little bit larger, and somebody's trying things out, seeing how the world might work, and all of a sudden they discover exchange. And then the question is, can you find that right person to trade with? We moved to 8, and they discover it, but half the groups just completely gave up. What are we missing here? Why is it that the group gets bigger, things fall apart? We had anticipated that it's costly to find that person with whom you could trade. And in our experiment, we had, based on our models, half the people are the same type. So if there are 8 people, 4 of them who you could trade with, but 3 of them who look exactly like you, those 3 people are useless to you. And what they did was you start talking to them and think, oh, let's trade. I'm like, that's not working. I give up. Find somebody else. Oh, that's not useful. I'm just going to give up. So there were transaction costs involved with finding people to trade, which is exactly what a market is about, minimizing those, bringing people together, knowing where they can trade. And so we then tested that proposition with a new design. Rather than just throwing all 8 people together, we started them out in pairs, so that you could find that person. And maybe they didn't want to work with that person, maybe they didn't want to explore the space, but if you got stuck with one of those people, we grew it to 4. There's some learning going on there. And then finally we added groups of 8. When you run that experiment, half the groups went full efficiency. That they were finding it out because there was both the transaction costs limited, but also the ability to learn from all the other people. Oh, you're trading, you're doing really well. And we do that too. And then that passed on to the system.
When they start to specialize in trade, how do they do it? You give me blue and I'll give you red. Look at Adam Smith. Read in the Pyramidal Zones how it describes his first axiom. I call it the axiom of discovery. His first axiom. What is it? It's the propensity to barter and exchange. He took that as a given. He said, I can't explain that. Actually, if I'd been him, I would point it out. I wrote a earlier book about human sociality. People are trading, they're just really being social. He didn't do that. In fact, he doesn't even tell you that he wrote another book earlier. He says, I will give you this that you want, and you that which I want. He uses the word give. That's exactly what people in the experiment do. They don't think of it as particularly trading. They discovered that, oh, you produce blue faster than I produce red, so you would tell them. So let's just, I'll give you some of my blue, you give me some of my red. Well, there's a lot of work to do. They got to find out there's an optimal amount, okay? So they need to work on that, and that takes longer to discover, but it's mutual giving. People discover that you have to give in order to receive. That's what a market is.
Developing these social relationships, which is something we did not expect going through the experiment. When you're trading with someone, somebody else will come up to you and say, hey, why don't you come and trade with me? And the person that you're trading with will say, no, you're better off trading with me. They developed that relationship over the course of the experiment, and it needed that relationship in order to fully take advantage of the benefits of trade. And so we had looked at it in terms from an informal or impersonal market, where they saw the problem as a personal social problem, which then led to a new experiment where we thought, okay, well, let's have them try to build this double auction with people they might not know it. So rather than just have everyone in one town together, we created an experiment where there are 3 separate towns, each with 4 people in them. And they each could produce 2 goods. But there was a third good that they couldn't produce at home. The other 2 towns could provide them. And so every single town could produce locally, but then there was one they couldn't get locally. we allowed half the people in these towns to come together and meet up. So now they're leaving the people they know, that they're socially interacting with, talking with, getting to know, and they're meeting up the possibility here to trade for things they don't have and they can't get at home. What are the conversations like in that middle? These are people they don't know, they're meeting up, and they're always going back home after the meet up. That's where they consume. What is it like? Those conversations were a lot more rivalrous going on. They would say, oh, I would like this. And then ask them, can I get that? Notice they're not saying, I'll give you this. They're saying, I need this. Who can get it for me? I need that. There was a lot more I in that area and we back at home. And those that were wondering, how is this working with these people when they're back home? What do they need? They have no idea what they need. That's the idea of a market, that they're going there to find out what other people can get for them. People were learning what other people were going to do for them, but it wasn't about us. At home, it was about us. Up there, it was about what I could do for you and what you could do for me. The conversations were about impersonal, and one of my favorite lines of the experiment was two people going up there, and they're coming back reporting to the village. What's it like going up there? I wish I could go there. And they said, no, you just make deals. And then somebody said, well, what is it like when you make this? Well, it's kind of like going out behind Denny's. You make the trade and then go home. Why does it feel like we're dealing with drugs? Because we are. That's all they were about. You're making the transaction and getting back. And it was very impersonal. And still, we built it such that we could try to see a double auction in front of it. I still remember this. I'm running the experiment. Our lab was in Fairfax, Virginia. Vernon was in Arlington in his office. He was calling me on the phone while the experiment was running. He goes, are you seeing a double auction? No double auction. We even built it such that the chat could go up, scroll up, and scroll down. The bids going up and the asks coming down. Oh, they didn't. They never used to do that. They were finding one-on-one, but then they were still making bilateral.
What has your research told us about sort of where real people, where markets are in terms of this one extreme or another? I don't know if you want to call it an extreme, but I know, Vernon, you've had some research on bubbles in markets, so the idea of rationality, but also the idea of just simply that human beings are incredibly selfish and greedy and only work to their own benefit versus being more social, communal.
Adam Smith's own language. So long as you do not violate the laws of justice, every person should be free to pursue his own interests in his own way. He doesn't use the word self-interest. It's interesting in looking back, we can oppose a certain way of thinking about it, which is not in Adam Smith. And remember, his first book was not about economics, it was about social psychology. The remarkable thing is that Adam Smith essentially invented social psychology in 1759 and then economics in 1776. He said, bring him into society, in other words, raise him in society, and you give him the mirror he needs. Just think about that. Isn't that a powerful metaphor? Isolation. We would never have this mirror. We'd never be able to see ourselves as others see us. And that's what the human species is all about. Families, our extended families, our communities. You see, what do we learn to do? We learn, as Adam Smith says, to humble the arrogance of our self-love and bring it down to what other people will go along with. He's not saying that we're not self-loving. We're all self-loving. But to get along in harmony with our neighbors, our closest friends, we learn to keep that under what he calls self-command. We self-command. We learn to have command over that so that we can get along. And that is actually a trading system. okay, but I do things for you, and you do things for me. We trade favors, we do things for each other, and when if you do something that's hurtful to me, I resent it. And that's the way I learned that early. You probably resent it if I do something hurtful to you. And we all don't have any trouble instinctively knowing what hurt and benefit is. You're hurt if you get less. Benefit, you get more. We all are basically implicitly taking into account the fact that we all prefer more to less. Better off. But we learn to keep that under control. It's an incredible way to think about that. And then, of course, when we start to socialize with strangers, start to trade with them. Now, if I give you something, I don't have to wait for you to return the favor. You give me something right then in return. So the transactions tend to be, the mutual giving occurs at the time, and so it's complete. But we don't every time your brother does something good for you, pay him for it. But with strangers, that's the way we get along better with strangers. So it's a really neat kind of way of thinking about the whole world. It's all very much a social world, but one of them involves these economic transactions. That remarkable, that jump-starting of wealth started somewhat a little bit before Adam.
We'll open this up to questions from the audience.
Made a differentiation between what Adam Smith said in regard to own interest versus how he's often quoted saying self-interest. Could you explain the importance of the differences of those two words?
Well, if you read both the Theory of Moral Sentiment and Wealth of Nations, I think Adam Smith is sensitive to the idea that people define their own interest in their own way. And this is where the rules of justice are shown. He always says, as long as people follow the rules of justice. Well, where do they come from? Where was that? Adam Smith sees the property right rules that we live by under the civil order of government. He sees those the origin of those property rights as far older than government. He sees them as a rising in our sort of tribal groups. In other words, the Ten Commandments, you see. Those were oral traditions for centuries before that. It's in the major religions. You see, you have morality and rules developed in order to produce order. And so Adam Smith's idea, the way I describe it in the Theory of Moral Sentiment, it's our long experience of hammering out rules by consent in groups that then set the stage for a much larger society, the civil order of government. And for economy then, the economies to become much, much larger. And then later he talks about the origin of the wealth of nations. Why are nations rich? Where does that come from? The early part of the story is actually his first book. So what I've learned in reading the Theory of Moral Sentiments and using it long after I first read the Wealth of Nations, you really need to read both. It was a mistake to begin with the Wealth of Nations. But economists did it because they couldn't understand that other book. What's that other crazy book about?
So when you act in your own interest, you are not putting yourself necessarily above somebody else. When we move to self-interest, there's that step that now I'm somewhat putting myself above other people, my interest over and then, so that language starts to slip a little bit in understanding what Smith is talking about. But it's always people going to the same level. Give me that which you want, and you shall have which I want. is the meaning that we said to offer. It's you and me on the same level, not thinking that I am in some way better than you because I'm going to have what I have and what you have. And self-interest tends to lead to that kind of thinking that I'm above you. And Smith is all about being on the same way. As Bernie said before, you got to bring down your self-love so that other people can go along with it. That means we're in this together.
I guess the question is, how would Adam Smith reflect on the shortcomings of economics, which I'm still talking about vacation, especially as it pertains to things that commodities that are more critical, for example, like clean water?
The problem with water and clean water is that once it flows, it's out there, and whether or not who has access to it. So can you set up a system? And David Zeppelin has written about this in a book on water economics. That's very good. The idea is you want to have people have access to get to water, and that you don't want to close off who can get access to it. But once you do that, it doesn't have to be provided necessarily from the center. Clean water is a matter of making sure that we all have a way to get to it, and then how it gets distributed and the pricing of it can be quite different for different size customers, but that everyone has access to some part of that.
All right, well, thank you all. It's been a pleasure.